And I think people like to see that, don't they? People like to see things being pushed to their limit. They like to see incidents and potentially accidents as well, doesn't it? As crazy as it sounds, they want to see the real side.
Well, I think it'll do that. Well, I know. Let's have a go. Let's try and do that with it. And if it did, it did. If it didn't, oh no, your tool won't do that.
Hello and welcome to another MTDCNC podcast today. We're doing this from our HQ in the studio in Northamptonshire in Findon. I've got two guests with me. I've got Joe Reynolds, who has been on these podcasts many a time, but a gentleman that hasn't, Tom Skubala, who joined MTD about 2 weeks ago. So we thought this was a great opportunity to do a podcast and find out a little bit more about Tom, his backstory, the good bits, the bad bits, and also talk about some of the things he's seen so far in the last 2 weeks. So Tom, welcome to MTDCNC.
Thank you very much.
For those that don't know you and haven't seen you, which I'll be surprised at because you've got a huge Instagram following, maybe you could just explain who you are and what your background is.
Yeah, so I'm Tom. I have a Instagram page called The UK Machinist.
That's my phone, carry on.
I was a CNC machinist for 10 years. 6 of them, I ran a Herco, and before that, I was on a XYZ.
Okay, so you joined us. It must have been about 2 weeks ago. We've been in communication for many years. You've followed what we've been doing, and we followed what you've been doing. So you'd think this is going to be a pretty good marriage, wouldn't it?
I'm hoping so. Yes, after and we had a good chat at Mac.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm hoping it's going to be a lifelong marriage.
Good. Well, now you've been with us for 2 weeks, and you've been to various companies, which we'll go through to see what you've picked up and what you've learnt so far. What do you know about this guy, Joe? I've got to bring you in at this stage.
Yeah, obviously I've followed him for some time. I'm pleased to say he's followed me as well, which always goes down well. But yeah, no, it's obviously clearly he's an engineer. Clearly he likes cutting strategies, and yeah, for anyone that knows Tom, I'm sure you're familiar with his videos. Good and bad videos. And when I say bad videos, I don't necessarily mean production quality. I mean when a mill blows up, for instance. So he likes his trial and error. Does that, Tom?
What has been the success or the secret so far to your success on the Instagram page, the UK Machinist? What do you think made it blow up so quickly?
I think people obviously you see other people trialing stuff, and you think, well, I want to have a go at that. But many people, either don't have the tooling to try it or just don't dare try it. And I always thought, if they can do it, why can't I do it? Oh, that works. Well, let's push it a bit harder then and see if it works.
And I think people like to see that, don't they? People like to see things being pushed to their limit. They like to see incidents and potentially accidents as well, doesn't it? As crazy as it sounds, they want to see the real side.
Well, most people run their parts through, and obviously they've got a time, or they've got requirements to meet, or the tooling they order has to last so many. Look, I was quite lucky with the Instagram where companies used to send me tooling to trial, so it didn't matter. It was, I think it'll do that. Well, I know. Let's have a go. Let's try and do that with it. And if it did, it did. If it didn't, oh no, your tool won't do that.
Well, it's absolutely fantastic to have this page as a part of MTDCNC and all the channels that you operate. Now, Tom is going to be, like the rest of us, visiting engineers up and down the country and around the world, of course, as MTD is an international business now. And he'll be looking at, potentially some of the things in a little bit more depth than we, or personally I have done in the past, some of the things that you talk about. So it should add or be a really good addition to our channel. Tom, tell us, let's say, a couple of the things that you've done so far, videos that you've appeared in, places that you've been where you've gone, wow, this is different for me, because you're used to being on the shop floor every day.
Yeah, and obviously we used to do all sorts of materials, but one material I'd never got to machine was graphite, and one of the first places I ever went to were machining graphite, and I can say thank you that I never had to machine that, because it looks awful.
And so where was that?
That was at Tooltech in Plymouth.
Okay.
And they had graphite moulds, which they used to send out, and then when they were worn, they'd come back, they'd just skim 2 mil off the entire top face and send it back out again. And you can't believe how much dust or
It must be like a paste. Is it like a paste?
Well, I've always thought that you machine graphite dry because obviously then it's just dust. But then you have the problems of, is your machine sealed? Is it leaking out? Because it's not great for you. Well, these guys were machining it with coolant for that fact. And when I was talking to one of the guys, he says it's awful. He says at the end of the week, he says it's like paste, but once it dries, it's like concrete. He says and it just wrecks the inside of the machine.
See, I've never seen it machined with coolant. What I know of graphite is very small cuts, because if you hit it hard, almost not too dissimilar to chalk. You know, it's harder than chalk, but similar thing. If you hit a piece of chalk really hard, it's going to snap, isn't it? And it's the same with graphite. And to see it cut and dry, I must admit I've never seen that. Typically, you have a machine. If you do lots of it, quite often it's a bespoke machine where you've got seals around machines, and not just mist extraction like you should have on the VMC, almost like a Hoover rather than a VMC. Mist extraction. So to see it with coolant, that must be fairly. I wouldn't like to see the dust. You wouldn't want to machine anything but graphite thereafter. I wouldn't think on that
Wouldn't be
machine.
good for your lungs, would it?
Well, I guess if it's paste, it's all right, but yeah, the dust isn't. That's why they have to be. That's why they have to be enclosed. But yeah.
Well, I asked him to take a video while I was there, and the machinist let me take a 20-second video. After that, the coolant went straight back on.
Because they actually say what the final part was going to be, or what their machine.
No, he wouldn't let me know what it was, but he was saying they even had extraction on the machine, but it wasn't powerful enough.
Yeah.
With how much dust was coming off to pull it all out.
I can imagine they're normally bespoke. So was it like electrodes, 3DM machines?
I think so. Yeah, I think they were like dyes.
So why were you there though? You weren't there to see graphite. What
No,
was the purpose?
we went there because they had changed CAN systems to Hypermill, and they'd actually had Hypermilling 5 years ago, but because of what they thought would be such a long process to change over, they never did it. And actually, the guys had 3 days worth of training, 2 days off for the weekend, another 3 days of training, and that's it. Their old system was gone. They were completely switched over, and they couldn't actually believe how fast it was and wished they'd done it 5 years ago.
And that video is actually on the MTDCNC website and the YouTube channel as we speak, so worth watching. I suppose, is there any machining graphite in that video?
No, that was something separate.
Okay. Other companies you've been to, Pattern Fasteners, there's several so far. What did you see at Pattern Fasteners? Because you took a little video.
Yeah,
for
Pattern
the
Fasteners
Instagram page
was, I feel like one half of the shop floor was now, and then you walk back in time when you went to the other side, because they had a guy, while we were there, manually thread rolling, and I did not want to get my fingers anywhere near that.
We're going to put that cutaway over the top of this so people
But
can see
also, they had dot programming machines. And
like the
it.
Ouija
Like
board.
I've never seen that before. Putting
like
little... plug board programming.
You still find sometimes those machines are still possibly the fastest solution.
Well, that's what they were doing. They were one of the...
Some applications, you just cannot beat that type of... I won't even call it a technology.
One part they were doing is they were making bolts, but they'd had like the middle bit of the bolt they were turning away, so it was like thread into just nothing into the head of the bolt. And he says for them to machine it from scratch was more expensive than then buying this part off a shelf and just nipping that little bit out.
Yeah,
and that to me was unreal. And we stood there and watched him do it, and it was seconds. In, out, in, out.
That thread rolling process, and I've seen lots of thread rolling before, but I've never seen that. It's almost like, and like you said, hopefully you can see it on if you're watching this podcast, you'll be able to see it. But it's almost two rails passing each other, isn't it? Whereas traditionally it's two heat treated and thread ground dies, and they essentially squash the component. Whereas this, it was like two runners almost.
He's putting his finger.
But it actually wasn't as dangerous as it looks. Everyone's looking at it going, "Oh, health and safety will go mad." But it wasn't actually that bad, because afterwards, when you actually got to see it, where he drops the bolt in was like a hole which it fell in. So he wasn't having to hold it in place; it dropped into the correct place. But that pit coming past his knuckles was...
It's still easy to make a mistake. It's a bit like, do you remember when we were in the States with Tony doing that Ellison Technologies job where they were rolling that plastic on that big drum, and he was stretching this plastic, and he was doing it 8, maybe 10 hours a day, and his hands were going over the top of this big roller, and you just thought, you wouldn't. The odds on him losing his arm at some point would have been extremely high, I would imagine. And I sincerely hope he hasn't. You've also been to Colchester Machine Tools and NCMT, haven't you?
Yes.
Suppliers of product rather than the actual end user. What was it like to be? I mean, you've probably been to Herco before, I assume, have you? But this, going into a showroom, seeing the machines, talking and touching and feeling them.
Well, Colchester was great because, first of all, I was with Rowan, and I'd never met Rowan before, and that was really nice. But
What
also,
was nice about that?
you are sorry.
What was nice about that?
He's a nice guy, Rowan.
I paid for lunch.
Yeah. But also, when you walked into Colchester, their stand from Mac, they now have up in their showroom, and it looks brilliant.
Yeah.
And obviously, you get to see some of the lathes and the millers in there. Like they've got one of the things I saw was a teacher lathe, which they put into colleges and universities where there's no DRO. So it's all done manually by looking at each little notch.
Seen it, yeah.
I'd never had to do that.
And they also do their range of sort of full CNC flatbed lathes, don't they?
Yeah, that was quite.
Can have driven.
That was
tools on
quite
them as
interesting because they do a combination lathe as well, which essentially is a manual lathe and a CNC lathe together, but you can run it either way, and also you can run it half manual, half CNC. So I think that is brilliant for somebody who wants to go from a manual to a CNC, but doesn't want to do that jump straight away. There is a middle ground, and I never see one of them. And like you said, it does come with driven tooling as well.
Yeah, which, not necessarily. I know it's great for students, it's great for universities, schools, colleges, but if you're not doing many components, that's as quick as anything, isn't it? So it's not exclusively for the education sector.
No, and the thing is with Colchester as well, they had a machine to suit everyone as in size. So if you've got a small workshop, they had a lathe that would fit, or if you've got a big workshop, they had something of the right size for everyone.
We'll talk about NCMT in a minute. Before we do, one of the reasons you were at Colchester was to look at stock machines, which, I mean, over the past couple of years, how many times have we seen, well, the supply chains have really restricted that, haven't they? But now it's kind of back and machines are available, can be delivered on short lead times. Well, Colchester's a perfect example of that.
Yeah, they can deliver within 4 to 6 weeks. But he did say if you twisted his arm a little bit, you could get it a bit faster as well.
And I'm sure you could if the kit's there. And I think on MTDCNC soon what we're going to be having is an X-stock, X-demo campaign. Because there are more machines now available back into, to be purchased and delivered quickly. So that's going to happen. It wasn't just Colchester, that was NCMT.
But just quickly back to Colchester as well. The good thing I found at Colchester is, yes, you can buy your lathes or your millers, but they also had £4.5 million worth of spares in the building for next day delivery.
I'm not surprised. How many Colchester lathes are in the country? Good grief.
It's the most searched term in the machine tool world, Colchester. It's the most searched brand.
And they were saying if you order up to 5 o'clock, you get it next day.
Good. Really good to hear. NCMT, now that was another company, again, stock machines that we looked at, the Akumas, the Makinos. You were quite blown away, certainly by some of the Makino offerings.
Oh, yes, yeah. But also the Akuma, the some of the programming bits on the Akuma were just great. So you got the Navi, the Servo Navi, all them. But the one I liked the most was the Navi, which essentially means you can't crash it even in manual mode. So anyone who's been on a shop floor will have had this, where you're trying to wind a job in, somebody shouts you, you're not paying attention, crap. Oh, I've just hit side at job with Emil. With that, you can't do it because it knows where the tool is and the job is.
I'd have a good go.
You'd probably succeed as well. What I did find interesting, Tom, was when we were at NCMT, one of the videos we did on the Akuma Genos L3000 was looking at the subspindle technology, and I tried to get out of you as a machinist where you felt that machine really fitted and some of the problems it would solve for manufacturers. And it was really good to get your steer on that. We won't go into detail now, but that video is going to be on our channel this week. That's on the Genos L3000 subspindle lathe, which is as well available from
Seeing
stock.
more and more of those, aren't we, the Genos machines?
Yeah, affordable excellence, as NCMT would say. Constructed beautifully, Akuma machines, but yeah, very competitively priced as well, and there for quick delivery. There's so many companies, I would say, in the last last 2 or 3 weeks that have been in contact with us saying, we've managed to get machines back in, they're here now.
They've probably
they're
all
ready
got the
to
same
go.
supply chain, all waiting for chips and all waiting for
Potentially, yeah.
standard components.
But it's good news for the market because engineering companies, they don't know what's happening from day to day, and they suddenly get a demand and they need a piece of plant to satisfy
Can't
that
always
need.
wait a year, 6 months for a machine.
Can't. How can you plan like that? So that's good to hear. 2 final ones before we wrap this one up, Tom, and then I'm going to ask you a little bit about some of your history in the machine shop as well. Historic threads. You got to ride a steam engine or something?
I got to drive a steam engine. That was
What were they making bits for a steam engine?
Well, essentially, they were making, as the name said, historic threads. They were making nuts and bolts for like anything that's too old to buy off the shop floor. So I got to drive the steam engine, and in the video, I think you'll see that all the nuts around the steering were all replaced by him, and he sells them all over the place. And yeah, they were just making nuts and bolts in really weird thread sizes that you just can't buy.
It's MPG is not very good for a company vehicle though.
Well, 4 mile an hour.
Tax is all right. Though,
Yeah.
Socialising, big part of MTDCNC's activity. You had a good night with the big man, didn't you?
Well, I did, apart from him stitching me up. But yeah, it was an amazing night.
Yeah, you enjoy it?
Yeah.
Good company. I mean, what was that event about at Heimer?
Well, it's the opening of their new facility, which is, a sand iron away from the previous one, but it's much, much bigger now. It gets a lot more of the Heimer technology, and in the building, which is good. But yeah, we were lucky enough to be invited the night before we filmed to an event, and there was obviously the Heimer family were there, all the representatives of Heimer UK, and some of our mutual friends and partners, people like Starab, people like Grob, and many others. It was good, really good day. And Tom's on best behaviour. I was very impressed, actually. Very impressed.
That's what I like to hear.
I did get warned before we went in.
It's good to hear from an MTDCNC individual. I'm going to ask you this question second. Tom, what's the worst thing you've ever done in a machine shop? So when you visit site, they know a little bit more.
Worst thing I ever did in a machine shop was change, on the machine I used to run, the tool height and tool diameter were right next to each other. And I changed the wrong one before going home. Next morning, came in, set the machine running, full rapid, straight into the top of the block.
Damage?
Well, the only damage it actually did, which I was surprised about, was knock the spindle orientation out slightly. But a quick phone call, and it was sorted.
That can't be the only thing, but we'll wait for people to ask you when you visit site. Joe, you?
Me.
You've got a back catalogue.
Yeah, there's a number. There is a number. Probably the two. I was on a CNC grinder actually, and you mentioned it earlier. Got the jog wheel. Someone's talking to you, and I come into the job. I can't remember the material, but it is. We waited weeks for this material. It was a one-off, and couldn't get this material. The stockist had enough for one. Of course, I'm winding it and grinding. It's the final operation, and I scrapped the part. And the other one, which I did get into a little bit of trouble for, basically. I used to have this trick where I drop pound coins by the coffee machine, and people would look around and they'd pick it up and walk off with it.
Did you glue them to the floor?
No. We used to do a lot of heat treats, so I put it in a heater coil until it was glowing red, and walked past and dropped it. So this particular apprentice bent down, picked it up, and they're jumping up and down, holding their fingers. Clearly, I must say, you wouldn't do that, and I don't condone that, and it's not what we should do in the modern world. But back then, that type of thing, you had rainbow paint, you had sky hooks, you had all sorts, a long weight.
I got the grease on the door handle. Yeah. I did get that.
Engineer's blue on the toilet seat.
Yeah.
That was the worst one. I remember I didn't once clamp. I used to work on this big Dory's VTL, and we used to machine these flywheels for diesel engines, and I didn't clamp it up properly. And these castings must have weighed, I don't know, 600-700 kilos maybe. They were huge, and I started. I mean, it didn't turn very fast, but started this off, and you're like those gridded sort of. Areas around the machine that you lift up where the swarf's underneath. They're quite hollow sounding on. If you drop something on it back, you should have heard that. Oh, goodness. When that thing came off the machine.
Did it wake you up?
A few stories about that too.
Hasn't everybody done that though? Hasn't everybody started a machine without clamping something?
Chuck keys in the chuck.
Oh no, I've done a few where I've not clamped the vise.
Yeah.
Or one of the same sort of thing where I put the part in the vise, got distracted, didn't clamp the vise, run the tool, and just a little piece of aluminium hitting the bottom of the machine. And everyone in the factory is like meerkats, come running over. What are you doing? Like, nothing.
That's the worst when everyone's
everybody does it. Doesn't matter what you do. As soon as you turn around, everyone's looking at you. Yeah. You think, oh, God, here we go.
used to have and we'll finish on this one. When I started my apprenticeship, we used to have those brown schmocks, and you could smoke in those days in the canteen. And what used to happen is people used to get to the end of their cigarettes and then subtly drop them into your overall. And people would be sitting there eating a sandwich. They'd be sitting there eating a sandwich, and the cigarettes burning in the schmock, and the schmock sort of going up in flames. I mean, unbelievable what sort of things went on in the machine shop. Tom, welcome to the MTD CNC team. Our viewers are going to be seeing a lot more of Tom in the coming years. Just to update you as well, we've got IMTS and AMB coming very soon. So if you're listening overseas, or you've got you're exhibiting at those events and you want MTD-CNC to come and cover what you're actually showing in terms of technology, then contact us at inquiries@mtdcnc.com. European travel's back as well. So many videos on the website at the moment from Tornos, WFL, DMG Mori. The list goes on. I know Tony's actually been in Europe this week at Heimbuch, Lang and Heimer and others. So much activity at MTD-CNC at the moment. Channel's growing as it always does. So thank you for watching and listening to this podcast. Thanks, Joe. And good luck, Tom.
Thank you very much. Good to see you, gents.
Thanks for listening to the MTD podcast. If you found value in this episode, please subscribe and leave a rating and review. Find more episodes on mtdcnc.com.